everyone, it's Christina from Our Wood Home. I just finished editing this garden update video and I realized I never did an introduction section. So here it is, I'm just inside at my desk. This video has been filmed on July 15th. So some things might look a little bit different by the time it goes up, but it's probably going to go up in the next week or so. This update, I think, is a lot more hopeful than my previous updates. I've noticed a lot of things growing and doing pretty well, and we've had a few small harvests already. So I hope that you enjoy this update. There will be a couple more after this one as well. This is the lettuce planter. It's next to a shed, and there's a tree that's been growing for a while. I keep cutting it down, but it keeps popping back up, so I'm just kind of leaving it. Anyways, this is the lettuce and spinach planter. It does need to be weeded. I've got a couple spinach plants here. The leaves are still pretty small, so I don't think it's ready to eat. I also have a lot of clover in here, so I need to pull that out. And then I've got lettuce. I'm thinking it might be too late to eat this. It might have already passed its peak flavor season, but I'm not sure. And then there's a bunch over here. Normally I just pick off a leaf and test it, see if it tastes good, or if it's still bitter, but you can see I've got an earwig trap on either side because when I was pulling out lettuce leaves to taste, there were earwigs in there. And I think you can see earwig droppings down in there. So that's pretty disgusting. Now I'm going to just take a leaf and wash it in the house and then try it. So maybe I'll do that now before I forget. Okay, make sure there's no earwigs on it before I put it in my pocket. It's kind of dirty, but that's okay. I really hope I didn't miss the flavor window for the lettuce because I really liked having lettuce last year. Let's go to the vegetable garden. It does need to be weeded. Story of my life, but you get what you get. It's pretty foggy out this morning, which is kind of nice. It's a little bit cooler as well. All right, so here's the overgrown main garden. I've got my potatoes doing pretty well, and then my beets behind it also doing well, and the tomatoes are doing well in different stages. So I noticed my potatoes were getting really eaten. The leaves were being eaten. Sometimes we get hornworms on the potatoes and tomatoes, both nightshade plants, but there were no hornworms. Couldn't see any other types of worms. And then we discovered just last night actually that it's slugs. I just saw one. Yeah. Right there. Gross little slugs eating my potato leaves. So I don't think it'll do damage to the vegetables themselves underground, but I'm going to go buy some beer and make a beer trap for the slugs. There's another one in there. So far this morning I've just seen 4 in the few seconds I've been out here filming. It's pretty gross, but I'm glad to at least figure out what has been eating them so that I can try to prevent it. If possible, I like to do things naturally with pest control. I have another earwig trap over there because I thought maybe it was earwigs eating the leaves. Plus I'd seen some earwigs in the soil. So I'm hoping they don't damage my potatoes. But anyways, I try to do things naturally for pest control. So I'm hoping this is still considered a natural remedy. The beets are quite large. You can see Some of these, they're a little bit smaller, but there's a big one over here. Yeah, in there. I'm going to be leaving some beets in the garden to flower so that I can save the seeds. Something I'm really trying to focus on this year is seed collection of plants that I grow in my garden. Oh, I'm also seeing a slug there. I had thought something else was eating my beets because the leaves are always just destroyed every year. But now I see proof. It's a slug. Yeah, like you can see the leaves are munched. Every single leaf on every single beet plant is munched. So now I know it's slugs. So that's great. At least I can set a few beer traps and hopefully try to get all of them. All right, let me go around to the onions and the tomatoes. This is my first year doing onions. I think I actually might have done them in one of the first years I had a garden, but it didn't go as well. So I've got a row of onions here. The other day I managed to actually weed the garden in this one spot, and then it started raining. It's been raining pretty consistently, and then the ground stays really wet, and I don't really like to be working around in wet ground, wet grass and weeds and stuff. But thankfully we have had so much rain, so the plants have really perked up. So I've got my row of onions, and then I had some space at the end of this tomato row, so I put some more onions. And I'm just seeing, is this a rogue onion? It is a rogue onion. I don't know what it's doing. Oh, there's more. Did I purposefully plant those there? Yes, I did plant those there. Okay, I forgot that I planted onions here between the onion rows. That's funny. Usually I mark my plants with a little stick or something until they start popping up, but I obviously didn't do that. So something interesting that I found in the garden a few weeks ago was some pop-up surprise tomatoes. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, at least 4 plants. And these just started from seeds that fell last year, so I'm not entirely sure what kind of tomato they are. I know it's one of 3 varieties, I think, so I just need to look at my chart from last year and see what it could be. But they're actually growing really quickly, which is nice. I'm thinking about transplanting the smaller ones just to fill in some of the gaps between the bigger tomato plants, but I'm not sure yet. So this is my rows of tomato plants. I haven't weeded in there, so there's a lot of grass too. I can't remember which varieties are which, but I made a chart showing that, so I just need to check it. They really took off and are now growing out of the cages, but I have to trim them anyways, so I think I'll try to strategically trim. I think I just stepped on onions. No. I'll try to strategically trim it so that I can cut off some of the plants that, or some of the stalks that are growing outside the cage. We've got some tomato babies coming in. This one is especially shrubby. I think last year I showed my crazy shrubby tomato plants, and I think they did so well because we didn't plant anything in the garden 2 years ago. So the soil was really rich, and we filled it with chicken manure from our coop, and we had also dug out several inches of the chicken run where they spend most of their time. So that was just nice rich soil with a lot of chicken waste and organic matter. So I didn't really think the tomatoes would do that well this year, but so far they're doing a lot better than I thought. Some of them are still tiny, like this one, but I think that's maybe just because I haven't been weeding it very well. Yeah, these 3, there's this one, that one, and then one behind it. They're all a little smaller. So they're all the same variety, I just can't remember which one. All right, let's go to another garden, I bet. I think in my previous garden updates, I'd shown this area, which we're planning to make a new garden at some point. It wasn't really something we decided definitely this year, but we had these extra logs, so we figured this is a good spot for a garden. And I decided to just start putting yard waste in there to kind of kill the weeds, but also maybe bump up the soil nutrition. We'll definitely have to put triple mix in. We can't just use our yard soil. It's not very nutritious or fertile. I just keep these 2 buckets here because they're my weeding buckets. So when I'm in the big garden, I can just pull out weeds, take these buckets along the rows with me, and when they're full, just empty them here. Let's go on to the pea garden. My shoes are so wet right now, and they have a hole in them. I've had these shoes since I was about 16, and I'm turning 31 in a few months. I think this is the longest lasting pair of shoes I've ever owned. All right, so here is this pea garden. Okay, let me start on this side. So I had been trying to grow watermelon. It was not doing well. That's comfrey. It just keeps popping up in all my gardens for some reason. So I had watermelon here. I thought it was going to do really well. It was not. So I decided to pull it out because I have watermelon in another garden. And in its place, I put an acorn squash because I had a ton of acorn squash growing from seed that I planted, but it was just growing much later than I thought. So I had planned around it, thinking it wasn't going to germinate, and surprise, they all did. So I decided to put one here. I'm not sure it's gonna grow. Honestly, if it doesn't, that's okay because I've got several in another garden, but I didn't want to just rip the plant out and put it in compost, so I put it here and we'll see what happens. Over here, well, that's the creeping thyme that just takes over everything. I've got 2 snow pea plants here. I don't know what happened to this one, but we came out one morning and it was all dead in one section, this section that's on the ground now. But the rest of it seems healthy. Both of them are healthy. Lots of little peas. I like to come out and snack on them. And another earwig trap because I'm just putting them in all the gardens. Here are a bunch of different beans. Last year I had some yellow pole beans and I just kept forgetting to harvest them. So they ended up drying out on the vine. And I thought, well, maybe I'll just plant some of those dried seeds, see what happens. And nothing happened. Well, something did happen, just not right away like I expected. I thought there would be plants popping up in a couple weeks, but that was not the case. It ended up being quite a bit later, but they grew. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or 6 plants from beans that I just stuck in the soil from a shrivelly pod. And then this one on the end, I don't know what it is, but it was some seeds, some bean seeds that a friend of ours gave us. Oh, is it a snow pea? Okay, so this pod belongs to the mystery bean. It is not a snow pea. The pod actually feels kind of fuzzy and quite thick. So I think those beans are meant to be shell beans, I think is what they're called, where you dry the bean to eat dried. You don't eat them fresh. I guess I could just ask our friend what kind it was, but it's more fun to just figure it out. David's been growing some maple trees in one of my grow bags, so that's what's here. This is another acorn squash. This one's doing actually a fair bit better than the other side, which is interesting because it seems like whatever I plant on the other side of the garden does terribly. It never does well, and I don't really know why. But this one's doing all right. Moving on to the herb section. Again, it needs to be weeded. This area is not doing as well as I would like or as well as it's done in the past, but it's passable. So I dug up some echinacea plants from a different garden. So I've got one here, one here. This one's actually going to flower. And that one which has started to flower. I bought some spearmint at the grocery store. Pretty sure this is parsley I grew from seed. This is basil, I think, that was growing in the yard and I just dug that up. Here's some calendula, which I've already been harvesting. And then there's a couple more in there. The comfrey, which is still growing no matter how many times I try to dig it up. And my sunflowers, which I grew from seed, bird seed actually. While I talk about that, I'm going to turn my camera to Bet because she's just so cute sitting there. Okay, so the sunflowers, I grew them from seed that was in my chicken's food. We buy a chicken scratch that has like corn, sunflower seeds, and some other things. And let's go over to the chickens actually. We usually just toss handfuls of seed through a fence for the chickens, and one year we noticed there was a bunch of sunflower growing just on the other side of the fence. So we decided, let's intentionally plant some sunflower seeds and see what grows. And usually not much grows. I planted some here on purpose, and I planted a handful or several in that other planter. I did have an incident with a chipmunk earlier in the spring. It was trying to eat all my sunflowers, but I just covered it. Ugh, sorry, an earwig fell on me. The chickens got it. Yeah, so I covered the chipmunk or the sunflower seeds so the chipmunk couldn't get it, and that seemed to help because they grew pretty well. So they won't be something we can eat. It's just going to be for the chickens. Let's go back to that garden. Over to this garden. I don't really know what I've been calling it. I think the new planter. This is just an old chicken waterer that we've repurposed because it was getting kind of rusty and we didn't want the chickens to be drinking rusty water. So David just put some holes in the bottom and we fill it with water and then can set it on plants or trees for a slow release. So this is a tomato that popped up. Not sure what variety it is, but I think I might move it. I'm undecided. Here's a pumpkin. It's doing pretty well. It's definitely smaller than the other one. I've noticed that there were earwigs inside the flowers that hadn't opened yet, like that one. It was really disgusting, so I've got some traps set in this garden as well. I didn't really think this through with pumpkins in a planter. It's definitely going to spill out, as you'll see with the other plants. So I think what I'm going to do once it grows a bit more is kind of cut off some of the extra stalks and just focus on a couple pumpkins from this plant so it can hopefully fill in this area and maybe over here. Alternatively, I'll just let it fall out the side and grow along the ground. This dill plant is here because I had planned to put cabbage here, and then I didn't, but I just left the dill. So this pumpkin plant is huge. Again, I did not think this through very well. Ew, what is that? I don't know if those are aphids or earwig stuff. Ugh, it's gross. I tell you, friends, organic gardening has its frustrations. But anyways, this big pumpkin plant, as you can see, it's quite large. This is already with a couple prunings. So what we've decided to do is just let it grow along the ground, because there is no way a pumpkin is going to fit between here and this little fence. Again, poor planning on my part. Now I know for next year. But there is a little baby pumpkin forming, if I can get in here. Way down there. There. I don't really want to touch things because I don't know what these brown droppings and stuff are. There's another little pumpkin back there. These are my Swedish snow peas, or Swedish peas that my friend in Sweden sent me. So we've been doing like some taste tests between these and the other snow peas we have. These are quite large, as you can tell. I think we're supposed to eat the pod and the peas together. My friend didn't really specify. She just told me what they were called in excuse me, in English and in Swedish, but they're quite large. I don't even think this is full maturity. So we put trellis up for the peas to grow and climb onto, and it was too tall. So we've put another chunk of fence, I don't know if you can see it, across there. And the peas are almost at the top of it. But it's growing so fast. There's so many peas every day. I think next year I'm just going to do 1 or 2 plants, because from one seed there's like 3 stalks on every plant. Okay, this one has 2. And this one had another one, but it fell over and broke because it was so windy. So these peas are a bit more crunchy and not as sweet as the snow peas. I prefer the snow peas, but David likes these, so he's not going to be able to eat every single fresh one before they start to taste too woody and bland. So what we're going to do is save some as seeds to plant in the future, and I'm also planning to dry a bunch of the peas because he likes peas in casseroles and stuff, so that should be fun. Side note, this is our giant grapevine. It's doing very well, and it has grapes. So hopefully the birds don't eat them all, and I can make some grape jelly this year. We do actually have a bird's nest up there. Kind of hard to see. Not sure why they made the nest there, because this is a pretty busy spot. Moving on to the other garden. All right, here's the planters. Let me try to do a wide-ish shot. Again, needs to be weeded. So this is zucchini I bought from the grocery store. It came in a 3-pack and only 2 of them survived, but I want you to notice the difference between this plant and its friend right next to it. So there's that one, and then this monstrosity. I don't know why this one's doing so much better. I'm also not sure what these white spots are on the leaves. If anyone has any insight, I would be happy to hear it or read it in the comments. I'm not sure what it is. The leaves all seem healthy, so that's good. We've got some zucchini down in there. I'm hoping this fence will be strong enough to support it. Next to that, I have a bunch of onions that I planted. I bought a pack of onion bulbs from Walmart, and I think there were at least 100 in the packet, and it was only $3. But after buying 100 onions, I realized that's a lot of onions. So I've kind of just been putting them in any place I can find, including this garden. Let me step around these plastic drums. David's going to turn them into rain barrels. So here's some more dill. This just grew on its own from some plants that seeded last year. Here is an acorn squash. I'm so happy this is growing. If you saw my previous garden updates, you may remember me lamenting about how I planted so much and very little actually germinated. So I think this is actually 2 plants. Yeah. And then again, ton of dill. Yesterday I actually came out and cut a bunch of it down because it was just taking over. So I'm going to be drying that. There's another squash here. I think I'll just leave it. I don't know if it'll do as well as the other 2 because it's so much smaller, but it's not in the way. And I don't like to just pull out plants and throw them in compost. I'd rather try to grow them and have them produce if they're able to. Here's my row of cabbages. There is a little fence net thing over it. It's just some black mesh that I bought at the fabric store. This is my feeble attempt to keep cabbage moths out. So as you can see, I did not do a good job because the leaves are still eaten. And what's that? It's a cabbage moth. Well, a caterpillar. I'm going to turn the camera off because I need 2 hands to get him out of there, but then I'll come back. All right, that little caterpillar became a chicken snack. So there's cabbage moths here, and they go for cabbage plants, but also plants in that family. I don't remember how to pronounce it, but it's cabbage, kale, cauliflower, broccoli, that kind of stuff. So last year I had a big problem with them and I just gave up on my cabbage plants. But this year I thought I'm going to be proactive. One way to keep them away is to plant dill around your cabbages. So I planted cabbages among the dill. The dill here was huge. I just cut it down the other day so I can make the covers more closely fitting. But my dill had an aphid infestation, which was not a good sign because dill is supposed to be something that bugs don't like. So that was kind of discouraging, but I thought I'm still going to try to protect my cabbages. Then I noticed the leaves were being eaten. Oh my goodness, there's another one. I don't know if you can see that. Well, I noticed the leaves were being eaten, so I did these covers because I had seen some butterflies in the area, some cabbage moths, sorry, but they didn't seem to be a problem yet. And wouldn't you know it, they still are. So what I'm having to do now is come out and check every day and manually remove them, which is really frustrating because I tried to be proactive and I tried to protect them, but what can you do? Next year when I do cabbages, I'm going to have David build me a better cover and cover it first thing in the season, not wait partway through. Thankfully, cabbages are something that can produce without having pollinators, because you don't want to be putting a cover over something that needs pollinators, otherwise nothing can get to it. So let me show you what else is in this planter, and I'll pick that cabbage worm caterpillar thing off when I'm done filming. I don't think he's going anywhere. All right, so in this garden I also have some lettuce and kale that I planted. That's just racing around the yard. I wanted to do succession planting so that once the lettuce was past its peak flavor in the blue planter up at the front, then we could still have some later in the season. I'm not sure how well that's going. The spinach seems to be looking pretty good. Here are my cucumber plants. These are English cucumber. I've just got 2 here. And let's head over to the other planter. These are my carrots. I have 2 different varieties. An orange one, I think it's called Denver Half Long, and then a multicolored variety. Can't remember which carrots are planted where, so it'll be a surprise. I'm glad that they're growing though, because I wasn't sure for a while. Further down this row are my pickling cucumbers. These plants are huge. I'm regretting planting 6 because that's going to be a lot of pickles. I just saw a little one popping up. There we go. So cute. They did well here last year, so I think they'll do well again. And we've got another earwig trap. I grew some peppers from seeds, and I noticed that there's some holes in the leaves. I think I read online last year that there's like a little bug that eats them. I'm wondering if it's that guy. I don't know. I think I'll have to... Oh, that one's really munched. I think what I'm going to have to do next year is start them indoors much earlier so that they can be quite a bit bigger and hopefully more resistant to whatever's eating them by the time they go outside. There's another plant. Oh, that one's got a decent sized cucumber already. I'm not sure if you'll be able to hear me for much longer over the traffic, but if not, I'll just do a voiceover, so if it sounds different, that's why. Okay, I got a quiet break. Let me try to finish filming. Here's some parsnips. I don't really know when they're ready, so I'll have to do some research to see when I can pick those. This cucumber plant is just like taking over, really crowding out the parsnip. Hopefully it doesn't damage it. I've got a raspberry plant growing here that I'm definitely going to have to transplant because I don't want it there. It just was put there by a bird, I guess. Okay, so this is my watermelon. I've got 2 plants going. This one doesn't seem to have much fruit yet. So it was kind of an interesting journey with the watermelon. I didn't really do a ton of research, but I figured I've bought Ontario watermelons. I live in Ontario. I should be able to grow watermelon. And I found out that is true, but watermelon need a lot of babying. So we get some pretty cool nights here in the spring, and my watermelons were just looking pitiful. So what I did was cover them with some clear plastic containers. I actually used a clamshell style spinach container when the plants were small, and I just kept it covered all day, all night, kind of like a little miniature greenhouse. And I think that really helped because it kept the plants warm even in the evening and the early morning when it gets a little bit cooler. So they started growing really well after that, and now they're too big to fit under any cover. So hopefully it continues to do well. This is one of the acorn squash plants that I started from seed and that did not seem to be germinating. So I gave up on it and put some watermelon there instead. And of course it started to grow. So I am gonna leave it because it's pretty well established so far. And what I've decided to do, well, David suggested letting this watermelon just grow along the ground in front of the planter. He said he'll just be careful when he's cutting the grass so he doesn't run over it. So I think that's what we'll do. Yeah, hopefully that works. So as I said, that's an acorn squash. This is another watermelon plant. This one looks like it's doing better. There's a lot more flowers. It did have some leaves that shriveled and died, but I had done the same thing with this one, just covering it with a big clear plastic container for a while, and it's grown quite a bit. This is where those other 2 acorn squash plants came from, the ones that are planted in the pea garden. But I cleared them out so that the watermelon can grow along this area. I have a feeling that's not going to be enough space, but I don't know. I'll cross that bridge when we get there, I guess. So I think that's everything I wanted to show you in my gardens. I'll do another update probably late August, and then before everything is harvested, I'll maybe do a harvest vlog as well. But until then, thank you so much for watching. I hope that you enjoyed this video. Please feel free to check out the other gardening videos. I do some more updates and planning of my gardens. If you like what you see, please feel free to give this video a like or leave a comment, and take a look at some of my other videos and consider subscribing as well. Thank you so much and have a great rest of your day.